I'm coming home.
Pass picked off by Foch. Here comes LeBron. Somehow Durant lets it go. Kevin Durant.
Unstoppable player we have in the NBA today.
Let's go. The Milwaukee Bucks select Jabari Parker.
The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
Return to the Mac. Get up what it is, what it does, what it is.
Hello everybody and welcome back to our NBA preview shows. We're moving on to the Western Conference into the Northwest Division. And unlike some other previewers of the NBA, Steven, we're going to start these previews and continue them. We will not cancel them midstream or get suspended by ESPN.
No, if only we were actually working for ESPN.
I don't know. I see these suspensions recently, and I think I like freedom of speech. You know, I want to be able to go on my podcast and dare my boss to fire me and not be fired.
Thing is, he is his own boss. He can fire me, but he is his own boss.
Wait, me or Simmons?
You.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. So let's talk about this division then. It's a really fascinating division, the Northwest, because you've got some teams who aren't in win now mode. You've got some teams who should be in win now mode, but don't appear to be making moves as though they're in win now mode. Really, really interesting. And then you have the influx team, in my opinion, in the Denver Nuggets. It's just a fascinating division.
Yeah, it is. It is a fascinating division. I mean, I think the Denver Nuggets are one of those teams you don't know whether they're going to have enough to get up into the playoff picture. You've got obviously Minnesota have had a bit of an overhaul. Then you've got the Blazers and the Thunder that are the class of the division, and then the Jazz obviously would be the team that you would expect to finish still last in their division. But at the end of the day, they got Dante Exum, which is obviously going to be one of the big stories over the course of the season, and a guy that a lot of people are going to gravitate to.
Let's start with the Utah Jazz then. They go 25-57 last year. They don't make the playoffs. Obviously, they end up in the lottery. Have the 5th overall pick, select Dante Exum, who slid from some mock drafts, but, you know, I watched him at the beginning of the preseason. I was terrified. He looked dreadful. He looked like he should be in college right now, and he's not. He's in the NBA. Then I watched him the other night, and I'm like, holy crap, this guy looks good. He's going to be a monster. So I guess that's what's really going to make or break their offseason. They also obviously matched the Gordon Hayward contract from Charlotte, which is not a great contract, but in a few years should be pretty good, we think. And I understand why they had to do it. You couldn't not match that contract, really. So all in all, I would say for them a C in their offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I can see them matching Hayward. I fully expected that. I mean, it looks a bit horrific right now. But, I mean, 16 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists is pretty good numbers when you look at it.
He's on a bad team, though. You always got a grade on the bad team scale.
Yeah, I agree with you. There isn't a lot else around there. I mean, Trey Burke had his moments last year.
Like, he should be a 20-point scorer on that team, let's be honest.
Hey, he may be this year. You know, with other guys, you know, around him that, you know, should hopefully elevate their game. I mean, I would hopefully expect more from Burke and Burks and Exum, you would think as well, and he'll be able to open up the court. You would hope then that Hayward would take advantage of that. But obviously if he doesn't and just stay somewhere around that, and obviously then with that contract does look a bit overpaid. But at the moment, I don't think you can, we can really criticise him for what he actually managed to do. I mean, they've got a very young team that could potentially grow together.
Mm-hmm. They have. I mean, it's funny because, you know, we share the questions with each other. We ask a question each before we do these previews, and we both sent the exact same thing, which usually I change, but I thought it was funny to leave it in. Because there is one overriding question with this team right now. Yours is, how ready is Dante Exum? Mine is, where are you at with Dante Exum? It's just Dante Exum. Yeah, I mean, we'll get to Exum in a second, but you just got to look at some of the decisions this team has made recently. When we factor in the Hayward thing, they've spent a lot of time as a franchise betting on what people are going to do. Hayward favors Cantor without realizing that they had Millsap, Jefferson, and then, you know, the Hayward thing is an in-between right now. They spent a lot of time betting on people, which I understand as a smaller market franchise. You've got to try and find the next thing, try and assemble a team that way. They haven't rewarded people for being pretty good moving into their primes. They've bet on new people coming through.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, they've almost been a team that's been rebuilding ever since the days of Stockton and Malone.
Mm-hmm.
And they just really haven't found anything else. And when they do find a player that is reasonable, an all-star or whatever else, they tend to either let them walk away as a free agent or they just trade them away. I mean, some of the names out there would probably shock some people about some of the guys that actually have had, and it's like the Millsaps. I mean, Carlos Boozer was there for a while. I mean, Jefferson. I think Darren Williams was there for a while, wasn't he as well?
You imagine that team right now. That was when Williams was a multi-time All-Star. You could have Williams, Jefferson. You could have Millsap. You probably wouldn't want Boozer. I mean,
Boozer was an all-star.
He was because Coach Marr spoke about this extensively. The pick and roll that Williams and Boozer ran is just like deadliness.
They've had some really good players, but they've still constantly felt as though they was always in a rebuild, retool, or whatever you want to call it these days.
It feels like they feel like they're always one piece away. So let's go and get multiple pieces, which makes no sense. Let's talk about Dante Exum then. Where are you at with Dante Exum?
For me, he's still I don't want to call him an enigma, but I mean, he's still fairly unknown to a lot of us. I mean, he went, top 5 in the draft, but I mean, how many people knew that much about Dante Exum?
I don't think anyone still knows anything about Dante Exum.
And that's it, isn't it? We don't really know whether or not he's ready or not. I mean, he's not going to move straight into the starting lineup for the Utah Jazz. So he's going to have time to, sit on the bench and, learn and possibly play, I think, around about 20 minutes a game and gradually force his way into having more of those minutes. So it'll be interesting exactly what his rookie season does look like. But I think the Jazz could potentially take their time with him. I don't see any reason for trying to rush him along when you've got Trey Burke and Alec Burks as your starting backcourt anyway. But yeah, I mean, he's for me still very much an unknown player. I can see, flashes of brilliance, but also at the same time I can see where he's not as good, and he doesn't look ready to be in the NBA. So yeah, I don't really know what to expect from this season, and I've got not low expectations, but average expectations.
And like the Jazz are at the point now where, with these small market teams, when they go into this draft, they could have took Julius Randle, wouldn't have helped them with the logjam at the forward spot. They could have took Elfrid Payton, or they could have took Marcus Smart. Doesn't really move the needle for them a great bit. They're basically swinging massively and hoping Exum is this unbelievable lengthy guard who revolutionizes the position and they just hit big time. Like, when you're in this small market and you either have to trade for people under contract or you have to nail the draft, this is what the league's become now, where you have to, Julius Randle could be a multi-time all-star good player for them, but they need more than that. So you got to go and try and take the big swing on Exum.
Yeah, this is it. Sometimes you do have to swing for the fences and try and hope that you land big on a player, because it's all very well, maybe taking a player and that'll be a very good player for you for sometimes. Sometimes you have to try and take that chance when you've got the opportunity to have a high pick in the lottery to try and go and get that. I mean, we've seen teams that have been in the lottery now for so many years, and they've either drafted a very good player or they've really swung and missed completely. And it just wasn't a good pick, and they're still stuck in there. So why not take that chance and just see what it works out for you, maybe rather than taking the safe pick that doesn't really fit in with you anyway.
Over under 26 wins for this team.
I think 26 is probably maybe about right. I think maybe they'll win a bit less than that.
Yeah, I didn't see how they improved this offseason unless you see big step-ups in Cantor and Favors, which is definitely possible. And Trey Burke in his second year develops more. Alec Burks as well, who I kind of like. And Exum is pretty good in his first season. Plus, Rudy Gobert was really good in FIBA. We can't forget that. I just can't see them. I don't think they improved.
No, I don't think they improved. So, I mean, they won 25 games last year. So I think, it could be round about that sort of thing again. I think they maybe will be better at the end of the season, because obviously I think Exum would be hopefully more used to being out on an NBA court at that point, and who knows how many minutes he'll be playing by then. But I don't see them getting near 30 wins. I think even that would be pushing it.
Okay, let's go to the Minnesota Timberwolves, 40-42 last year. But let's just discard that whole thing because this situation has changed so much. Obviously, you lose Kevin Love, your franchise player, in a trade that brings you in Andrew Wiggins. It brings you in a first-round pick. It brought you in Anthony Bennett. They flipped that pick to go and get Thaddeus Young from the Philadelphia 76ers, a completely different looking team right now. Rubio, Kevin Martin, Wiggins, Young, Nikola Pekovic, Bunninger, as well as a trade chip they have, JJ Barea. A vastly different team. Flip Saunders comes down to be the coach as well as the head of everything else in the organization. This team to me is just so odd because they should hit the reset button. They're too prideful to because they don't want Kevin Love to see what's happening there when they let him go. And Flip Saunders doesn't want to lose because he wants to convince people he's a good coach. So now they've got this situation where they got Thaddeus Young, who makes not much sense on the team. They need to trade Kevin Martin. They should trade Chase Budinger. And really they should turn this team over to Levine, find out what you have in Rubio, Wiggins, and maybe even trade Nikola Pekovic just because of the contract. Like, this is the time where they should try and not be good and let Wiggins and Bennett and Levine figure out if they're NBA players, starters, whatever, and let them just figure it out on their own rather than what they've constructed here.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why they brought Thaddeus Young in, because obviously they had a dire need at the forward position alongside Andrew Wiggins. I can understand why they brought him in, but yeah, it's not necessarily the best move. But I mean, it was a move they looked to make because they don't want to look too poor in the post Kevin Love era, like they were poor in the post Kevin Garnett era. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think they've got more talent here than what they had in the post Garnett era, so I think it shouldn't be as bad as some of those years were after that. It's to be interesting how obviously Andrew Wiggins adjusts to playing in the NBA. Obviously Anthony Bennett as well was a train wreck last year, so it'll be interesting exactly what he can bring to the table this season. I do agree with something you said. I would try and move Pekovic if you can. The problem with Pekovic is trying to move him. Everyone will take a look at it and go, yeah, it's great. When he's healthy, yeah, he's a really good NBA player. It's the when he's healthy part. And Pekovic is injured every single year at some point. And that's obviously what will put a lot of people off, because I think you've got to try and move Dieng into the starting lineup as soon as you possibly can. Because when Pekovic was out last year, I thought Dieng played really, really well. But that's a logjam. You've got to do something about that. You can't play, Dieng and Pekovic together. So you've got to try and move Pekovic where you can. I think, dare I say, you maybe want to hope that, a centre on a team that's either trying to get into the playoffs or a team that's looking to just make that next step, and that's where their biggest need is. You try and offload Pekovic to that team and just get that salary off of your books. It's not a horrendous salary, but it's still a draining salary when you can save money by moving Dieng into the starting lineup.
It's not good because his contract extension only kicks in this year. It's 5 years, 6. I'm looking at Spot Rack here. 12.1 each year. The obvious fit for me is the Phoenix Suns. I don't know if they have the cap space, but, they have, is it Plumlee they have there? Mason? They don't have Miles either. They have a Plumlee twin. I know that. Pretty good. But if they want to compete in the Western Conference, we'll get to them in the Central preview, but they haven't moved the needle for themselves this year. So why not go out and land a center that they need in Nikola Pekovic? That's the only fit I can see. Outside of that, I mean, they're going to be stuck with him because I don't think anyone's going to take that contract. When you start pulling out the rap sheet of injuries, that thing's going to unravel for a long, long time. We're just niggling things. The guy just isn't healthy. And Gorgui Dieng he could be a starter. And this is the year to find out whether he could be even a 2010 guy, because last year he was pretty impressive. I just don't understand what they're doing. I understand why they're doing it. I sort of understand what they're doing to backtrack on what I just said. I just can't comprehend why they're doing it.
Yeah.
Flip, you want to, your ego, you want to prove you're a good coach. I get the owner doesn't want to be, he feels embarrassed by Kevin Love quitting on him early. I get that. But what's going to happen now is they're going to end up overpaying for Ricky Rubio. They will probably trade Kevin Martin, but they'll keep Pekovic around. Maybe they move Budinger. It just isn't good for the development of the players that they have there. And they've got some players here who could be big time stars. I'm worried about Zach LaVine. He hasn't looked great in preseason, to say the least. I'm worried about stunting the growth of Wiggins, which is what this should all be about.
Yeah, I mean, you should pretty much turn a team over to Wiggins. He is the future of this franchise. I mean, we talked a lot about Andrew Wiggins. I mean, he's a tremendous defensive player. He's a NBA-ready defensive player. Some of the offensive skill set isn't quite there yet, but it will develop. And you just got to give the guy a bit of time and allow him to develop. I don't think Flip Saunders is such a bad coach to learn under. I mean, he's very experienced. And I think that will help at Wiggins. And it's interesting to see him have another go around of trying to do this, obviously after being upstairs and obviously also being an analyst as well at times. So I quite like him being back on the bench for a team and the Timberwolves, and I do wish him well. But I agree with you. I don't know where the identity of this team is. I don't quite know what they're trying to do. I mean, Kevin Martin's name was linked in all kind of trade rumours over the off-season. I still think if they had the opportunity, they would still try and move him along. He can give a lot of help to some teams. I mean, again, the Bulls were another team that were very interested, trying to get hold of a guy like a Kevin Martin. I think that's what we expected when Kevin Love moved along. It was going to be like a fire sale. We were going to find out which players the Timberwolves wanted to keep and which players they didn't want to keep. We just didn't see that. I mean, all we saw was Kevin Love going. That was it. So it was almost like, oh no, we don't want to be that bad. We was almost on the verge of the playoffs last season. We've got in Wiggins, we've got in Thaddeus Young. If we can keep Pekovic healthy, Ricky Rubio might develop his game a bit more. Maybe he gets his field goal percentage up above 40%. And things might not be so bad. It would be funny for me if Minnesota actually made the playoffs in the first year they didn't have Kevin Love. But for that to happen, a lot of things have got to go very, very right for them. I mean, they won 40 games last year with Kevin Love. I think they're dropping down into somewhere in the mid-30s.
You can't lose a top 10 player and anyone in the world think they're going to be better. And it's funny that...
I see it'd be funny if they did.
I know. I know what you're saying. Trust me, T-Wolves fans think they got a shot because they got Andrew Wiggins. Wiggins, I think is going to be really good. I've been on record before. I think he's going to be really good, but it shows you the sign of the guy so far. When we're looking at Jabari Parker, we're saying slam dunk rookie of the year. This guy was the first overall pick of the draft and should be a lead option on his new team. It's not like he's not going to see the ball because he's on the Cavs. Tells you a lot about the guy and his offensive game so far. I'm just looking at Chase Buddinger's contract here because they got a logjam at that small forward spot. They need to get Wiggins minute. They got Budinger, they got Corey Brewer, they got Shabazz, who they said they want to involve more this year. So Buddinger's got 2 years left at $5 million apiece. Now he had those 2 dreadful knee injuries. The second year's a player option. Trust me, he's picking up $5 million of a player option. He's an entering free agency. If you're Houston, Portland, do you take a flyer on Budinger in his health? I don't think they're going to be able to move. I think you're going to have to swallow maybe letting Shabazz go or someone.
I don't think Portland would touch him. I really don't. I mean,
Houston?
Houston's a different kettle of fish. I mean, Houston are just looking to, try and get whatever they think they can to try and put them over the edge.
Drafted by Houston.
They obviously lost Chandler Parsons, but then they picked up Ariza. So I can't really even see Houston. I think it's all, when you're looking at this Minnesota team, and maybe this was the case over the off-season, is you sit there and think, well, you should have probably moved Martin. You should have probably moved Budinger as well. You possibly could have moved Pekovic, and yet they've moved none of them. And it just makes you wonder whether Minnesota were working the phones a hell of a lot, and teams were just turning around and saying, look, no, we're really not interested. It'll be interesting to see what happens as we get nearer towards the trade deadline, and they've got to try and move the guys before then, I think, and try and give a completely different look to this NBA team. But I just wonder if that was the case, because maybe they wanted to move him and other teams really didn't want to buy into it. But I want to touch on you, obviously, like the Nikola Pekovic contract. We talked in a previous PPO about Marcin Gortat. It's exactly the same contract.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly the same. Now, if both guys are healthy, I would probably take Pekovic.
One guy's 2 years older as well.
Yeah, one guy is 2 years older. But I mean, if they're both healthy, I would take Pekovic. I think Pekovic is a better player.
Gortat's a surefire bet, though.
But Gortat is more reliable for me, and that's probably what it would come down to. Teams might take a look at this and think, well, why are you paying $60 million to Pekovic when a lot of teams probably would prefer to take Gortat out of the two?
It's true. That's a similar contract to Larry Sanders, by the way. Does that scare you?
That does scare me. I'm not a big fan of the Larry Sanders contract.
Key questions for this team. The Rubio contract extension. It's going to hang over them for the majority of the year. Everyone's asking what's Rubio's worth, what's he going to get. He's such an interesting case because he hasn't developed one bit. Let's be quite frank here. He's a really good defender and still gets criticized as a bad defender, but he's really good. Plus, he more than anyone is a good defender because he creates defensive turnovers at a rate that many other people don't, with his jumping into the lane and steals and things like that. But can you play in this league if you can't shoot and you can't even finish at the hoop? I don't think you can. And the guy is not a normal guy to evaluate because he's been playing pro basketball for 10 years. This isn't your regular 24-year-old point guard in the NBA. I mean, the guy's been playing for a pro level for 10 years now, and he's just come over to the NBA. We've known about him forever. Scares me to death they're going to give him a stupid contract.
They could do.
And I think someone will give him that contract, by the way. Even if it's not them, someone's going to give him a big contract.
See, the fans that I know that are Timberwolves fans are still very high on Rubio. I think they take a look at his passing ability, what he does from a defensive standpoint. But I mean, we were talking to guys from the Timberwolves last year, and still the concern was, certainly from one of the parties we spoke to, around the fact that his jump shot really wasn't that great.
Does it worry you more? Sorry to butt in, but does it worry you more that the jump shot's not great or that he still doesn't drive to the rack effectively? Like, if he's going to do one or the other, as a guy who's a great passer, you want him to dribble, penetrate, and then be able to kick out rather than just have that jump shot.
Yeah, well, obviously in an ideal world, I'd like him to have both. But yeah, I'd like him to be aggressive and drive to the hoop and make the decisions. I think if he was able to do that, I mean, we've seen that Rubio can make the right decision. I mean, he's a phenomenal passer of a basketball. There's no doubt in that. But the trouble is, it's very difficult for him right now to drive to the hoop because teams lay off of him because they know he can't hit the jump shot. They're teasing him to try and take that jump shot, and he can't knock it down. So it then really makes a lane very clogged up because teams are, well, until you can prove to me you can knock it down, then we're not going to play you really tight defense because why should we when you could potentially go around us? So, yeah, he's not helping his case. He's got to first of all, I think he needs to sort out the jump shot and start knocking that down on a regular basis, and then it will then open it up for far more for him to do. It's really interesting as well, I think, from a defensive standpoint, having Rubio and Wiggins on the same team. That's interesting from a defensive point of view. That could be a bit of trouble for some teams.
Would you rather have Rubio or Jeff Teague?
I'd rather have Jeff Teague. I think he's a more offensively sound player, but I put them in the same category that they're overrated by their fan bases.
Mm-hmm. How much is Jeff Teague getting paid? How much is Jeff Teague getting paid? Do you know?
Teague, isn't it something like? It's not.
I'll have a look now.
He's $8 million. I don't think it's as bad as maybe some people think it is.
He's an $8 million a year guy. He's paid. Yeah. I mean, that would be fair for Rubio, but we both know he's going to get 12, 13 million.
Yeah, Rubio's going to get stupid money because they'll take a look and go, well, Kevin Love has walked away. Rubio's our next best asset.
And also, if you're like the Mavs, which is a team that is going to be a candidate because he's a restricted guy, like you go, well, we've got Chandler Parsons, he can shoot. Dirk comes back. We got Monta. Maybe you just need a facilitator who can get these guys open. Like, you could talk yourself into it pretty easily if you've got a really good team, but I just don't trust him at all. I really don't.
I'd love to see Rubio with Dirk. I really would.
It'd be fun. It'd
be so much fun to watch.
I mean, God bless if we had Dirk 3 years ago running that pick and roll with him in the pick and pop would be really fun, but Dirk next year, Parsons, Tyson Chandler, I don't know, man. He's going to get paid $13 million a year.
I tell you what, we'll get Mark Followill back on the podcast and we'll ask him whether he wants Rubio.
I don't think many of them want Rubio. I really don't.
I don't think they do. I think Minnesota fans think there's a market for Rubio.
I don't think the Minnesota fans do like Rubio. I think they're in serious denial. Like, we got Rubio. They have to stick with Rubio because everyone else in that draft class was really good. And now it's embarrassing for them.
I think the thing is as well, he came with such a reputation as well. And I think anyone that's going to get carried away with a guy that played in Europe needs to just, calm it down a bit and wait to see how they adjust to playing in the NBA. Because for every guy that plays well in the NBA, there are guys that come over and they really don't provide what you think they're going to.
You talking about Nikola Mirotic?
This is my reservation, is don't get carried away by him. He's got a really good skill set. He really does. He's not going to get a playing time straight off the bat. So it'll be interesting to see how he develops and how he uses this year to try and obviously force himself into the rotation. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him. He's not looked great in pre-season. it's going to take time for him to get going in the NBA and really be a really good player. I mean, people think about Dirk Nowitzki now as being one of the great NBA players of all time, not just a guy that came to play for Europe and was the best European. But Dirk wasn't that great when he first came over to the US, and a lot of Mavericks fans wanted him gone after the first year they'd seen Dirk Nowitzki.
Let's play a game of Would You Rather. We're gonna do it with the 2009 draft class. Stephen, would you rather have these guys or Ricky Rubio? And they all went after Ricky Rubio. Okay, Steph Curry.
Well, no brainer.
DeMar DeRozan.
No brainer.
Brandon Jennings.
Oh,
it's a tough one.
I'd take Rubio.
Yeah, I'd take Rubio too. Gerald Henderson.
Gerald Henderson's a really good scorer, but for me, he's not that great.
That's Rubio. Let's be honest.
It's got to be Rubio.
That's a tie. That's a 2-2 tie. Drew Holiday.
Take Drew.
Ty Lawson, no brainer.
Oh, that's no brainer. Ty Lawson is so underrated.
Jeff Teague's in that one. You take Rubio over Teague?
I like Teague's skill set more than I like Rubio's.
Darren Collison.
Really? Rubio?
People love Darren Collison. He's so bad. It's so funny. Taj Gibson.
Oh, Taj. You're asking a Bulls fan.
I know. I don't know why I even asked
you
that one. Here's an interesting one. Do you rather have Patrick Beverley or would you rather have Ricky Rubio? At least Pat Beverley gives unbelievable effort on the defensive side.
Yeah, but then Rubio's still a better defender. So I take Rubio.
Danny Green. That's close. I like Danny Green.
It is close. I like Green's game towards the end of the season and in the playoffs. I'd probably take Danny Green.
Okay, well, that just shows you how bad they botched that draft pick. How about Hashim Thabit?
No. I'd rather not.
Plaudits to Memphis for that draft pick.
Are we talking about Minnesota botching a draft? I'm sure we've had that conversation before.
Coach Marv's question before we get out of here for Minnesota. By the way, he didn't give us one for the previous team, so we didn't leave Coach Marv out of that one. I think he forgot. Will Gorgie Jeng eventually oust Nikola Pekovic for his starter spot? I've got a feeling Nikola Pekovic will oust himself and get injured again.
I think Pekovic will either get injured or he'll Minnesota eventually find a new place for him to go. But if Pekovic is still on the team and still healthy, then unfortunately the answer is no.
I think so. Okay, let's move on to a team that you are vastly underrating, in my opinion, in our conversations off air, the OKC Thunder. So much to discuss with this team, in my humble opinion. Kevin Durant goes down with the injury. We don't know how long that's going to be. I think it's going to be longer than they're saying because they don't want to panic people. And it's going to be like 3 or 4 months. We've seen that happen many, many, many times. And I look at what they do this offseason. I'm banging my head against a brick wall as many people. And Zach Lowe spoke about this today on the BS report. Just pay the luxury tax, goddammit. They drafted a player and told him before the draft, we're going to send you to the D-League. Are you cool with that? First time in history of the NBA draft, he said, it's not great, but okay then. And so they draft him with a 29th pick, a first round pick, they do that. They draft Mitch McGary, who's gonna be so-so. They sign Anthony Morrow, they sign Sebastian Telfair. I mean, they did nothing. And the only thing that's good for them is that Derek Fisher walked away and Caron Butler left. That's the only thing that helps them. Outside of that, it's a disaster. Why did they not just go in? I know they tried for Powell and they didn't have the proper mid-level exception because they had the tax exception, not the full mid-level exception. Why didn't they go out and try and sign Greg Monroe or someone?
Yeah, I mean, Powell was obviously the ideal fit. I mean, you put a front line of Powell, Serge, and obviously Kevin Durant as well. I mean, that would have been a really tough matchup for anyone, and that would, for me, have pushed them into the 1 or 2 spot in the Western Conference. So you didn't get Powell. So now you've got to rely on Steven Adams to be the center on this particular team. I actually like the pickup of Morrow. I think he could be a real asset for this team, knocking down threes. And as long as he knocks them down on a consistent basis, I think he's a really good pickup for them. And we saw last season, Jeremy Lamb was a guy you couldn't rely on. You've got to have another guy coming off the bench that you can turn to and be able to provide a scoring punch for you. Maybe Morrow's that guy. I mean, Reggie Jackson, I thought, did a pretty decent job when Westbrook wasn't around, but obviously he's now going to go potentially back to the bench, unless they decide to go with the 2-prong attack of Jackson and Westbrook, which I think is probably the better way to go. But obviously they've got to overcome this Kevin Durant injury to start off the season, which means a hell of a lot of pressure on Russell Westbrook. I mean, the difference was when Westbrook was out, Kevin Durant just was phenomenal, and he still makes players around him better players. Westbrook doesn't do that for me. Westbrook is still, at times, somewhat selfish. He makes the wrong decision. He can fill up a stat sheet, but then the Thunder will still lose a game because he won't make the right decisions. You know, he's a potential walking triple-double. If you do play fantasy basketball, he's a great pickup for you, as I found all of last season. But he's not, for me, I don't think he's got that leadership ability to be able to carry this team in the early going. And I think they could find themselves in a situation where they're maybe playing a bit too much catch up. And I think this is where maybe the Blazers actually win this division, and maybe the Thunder don't. And that's going to really cause them issues when they come to play in the playoffs. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying the Thunder aren't a playoff team, because they are, but I'm not high on them. I don't think they're one of the top two teams in the Western Conference, and that's where they should be. And that's because for me, they haven't done that much in the off season. We've seen it before where they won't pay the tax. I mean, it's the reason why James Harden's not a part of this team anymore. They will not spend the money in Oklahoma City. And they've got a god-awful coach in Scott Brooks. I can't believe he's now there for his 8th year. It's ridiculous. Scott Brooks should be gone. This team, by now, should have won an NBA championship, or at least been to multiple finals. And they haven't been. And that's got to be at Scott Brooks' door.
You know, I agree with you, and the argument that will be made, I guess, will be, well, the San Antonio Spurs are in the way. They match up beautifully with the Spurs. The Spurs are scared of playing them, and they've beat the Spurs multiple times. That's not the issue here. There's something missing. He's a really good motivator, I'll give him that, but he is a crap X's and O's on the floor coach. Now, I don't know great X's and O's about basketball, but I know that they seem to get into the last 7 seconds of the shot clock, and guys are looking at each other, and suddenly it's either a Russell Westbrook isolation or it's a Kevin Durant isolation. And they rush things. That's just me as like a layman's watching the game, like, wow, the shot clock's winding down again. This is the 6th possession in a row. When are they going to figure things out and run a proper play? He's just not good on the court. I mean, you know, I said Scott Brooks, because I'm so unsure. You said how hot's his seat. And I don't think his seat is hot, because go back to that MVP speech. Durant loves everyone there. Whilst he's happy, they'll be happy. The issue they have is, again, I don't want to just steal Zach Lowe's points, but the guy's a great basketball mind. And he said today, like, do they have the balls to sit Durant down and say, look, we know you love Scott Brooks, but you're here for one more year. We want you to win a title in OKC and be an OKC lifer. We have to make the move. He can't push us over the top. And I don't know if that organization does. And I think they are the worst owners in the NBA. Because they are abusing Kevin Durant's prime. They're abusing Russell Westbrook's prime. And they took a team from Seattle to Oklahoma City, a smaller market, and have paid no luxury tax, to the point where they're trading away all-star players to not pay the tax. That's ridiculous. Sending people to the D-League because they don't want to pay a tax. It's incredible, and they're going to be shocked, stupidly, when Kevin Durant leaves in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's a product of the current CBA as well. You know, it's really forced teams to reevaluate whether they're not going to pay the tax. I mean, you're talking to a Bulls fan. The Bulls have always been quite thrifty when it comes to things like that they don't want to pay the tax. There's a lot of teams out there because the penalties are so severe. But when you're getting rid of all-stars to not pay tax, and I've got a real problem with that.
It's like you build these teams for what? A 2-year window, I'd say, is the best way they do it. And you build, and then those 2 years, you say, let's go into the tax and let's win this thing. Okay? And if it doesn't work, you deconstruct the team, or you at least move the pieces to get yourself out of the tax. It's what Miami actually did. Their trouble was their window was much wider because of how poor their conference was, and they had the best player on the planet. That's where Mickey Harrison went wrong. Like, the Bulls, I think, were building towards that, and I'm not saying they would have done, because you know more about it than me, but then they lose Derrick Rose twice. So they get a pass for that, sort of. But with OKC, like, they've been building to this point where it's like, guys, you can go and win this whole thing. You've been to the finals, so you've gone through that growing pain. You know you can beat the best team in the conference. We know the best team is the Spurs, but you just match up so well. They can't put anyone as good as Kawhi is. You can't stop Kevin Durant, and Tony Parker's good, but he's not a good enough defender to stop Russell Westbrook, and Serge Ibaka's a mismatch nightmare for Tim Duncan. They just fit them so well. They could win this whole thing, and all they had to do is drop some cash to get a decent enough six-man off the bench and not rely on these draft picks that they've made in Jeremy Lamb, who they brought in through that trade, Perry Jones, Mitch McGarry's there now, and heaven forbid they've been starting Kendrick Perkins because they won't amnesty him because of money. Like, that's the real deal. They should have amnestied Perkins. It opens up $13 million in cap space plus whatever they had, and they could have got a real player. Like, they could have gone in for Gordon Hayward and tested the restricted free agent market. They could have gone in for Greg Monroe. They could have done something.
Yeah, but it's exactly the same reason why Chicago didn't amnesty Boozer, because they didn't want to pay his contract and then pay somebody else as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, teams won't do it. I mean, it's frustrating for the fan base. I'm sure, OKC have got some of the most frustrated fans right now because, this team should be knocking on the door of the NBA Finals every single year.
Who do you think's more frustrated, Durant or Sam Presti, the GM, who probably wants to do these things and he's getting a lot of the blame, and yet it's clearly an ownership thing?
I think they're both frustrated in their own way. And the trouble is when you've got a general manager that's probably got the handcuffs on and he can't do what he wants to do, I think it is very frustrating. I think Kevin Durant feels a certain amount of loyalty, obviously, to the city of Oklahoma City, and I don't think he will go anywhere. I know. Really? I just don't. I don't. Where else can you go?
29 other cities who are desperate to get him?
Yeah, 29 other cities that are so desperate to get him, but sometimes players don't want to move. The grass is not always greener on the other side. If you want to get Kevin Durant, you've got to present a really enticing situation to be able to go and get him. Not just to bring in a guy where he'll be the focal point of that team. That's not going to be enough for Kevin Durant. If you want to really go out there, you've got to put together a hell of a package that's going to make things look so great for him. And at the moment, it's a couple of years down the line, but at the moment, I just don't see it. I know we talk about, the homecoming for him, potentially going and playing in Washington.
That's
maybe.
A fallacy.
I don't know. But I don't necessarily see it. We even, we talked about potentially, like going down to Miami. Would he really want to go down to Miami and follow in the footsteps of LeBron going down to Miami? I don't see it. I really don't at the moment see Kevin Durant moving. And I think that the MVP speech said a hell of a lot about him. And I think he just feels as though Oklahoma City is his home. He loves being there. Unless things went very, very sour over the next couple of years, I cannot see Kevin Durant going anywhere right now.
Yeah, I think he's leaving. Miami's my guess, and I don't think it's got anything to do with LeBron, but he's going to be in that LeBron phase now. For these 2 years, he's going to get doubted constantly. Can he win? Does he want to win? Does he have the heart to win? All this bullshit that Skip Bayless and these people say on their shows that do get in the ears of these guys and do tick them off and force them to make what could be an irrational decision. But I just want him to leave because they don't deserve him. They don't deserve Kevin Durant.
Okay, the owners don't deserve him, but that's nothing against anyone else involved in that particular organisation.
Oh, Sam Presti deserves him. Scott Brooks deserves him. The fans.
The fans definitely deserve him.
They do, but I just don't think he's going to stay. That's all I can say. He's going to get to the point where he's going to be at that age, 26, 27, 28, and he's going to have no rings. And he's going to hear in his ear, wow, Kevin Durant may go down as one of those guys who was the best ever to never win a ring. And that's going to really annoy him. And he's going to look around and say, I've been here for a long time, and at no point have they shown a willingness to win and win on a continuous basis championships. And then he's going to have in his ear, he'll have Phil Jackson in New York, who can show the rings on the table. He'll have the Miami Heat and Pat Riley show the rings on the table. And that's going to be really enticing. Plus, you've got all the media stuff that goes with these guys now, the agencies. He just signed that ridiculous contract with Nike. Nike will have a hand in it. I just think New York right now and Miami have got a great shot at him.
I don't think it's a 0% chance he, against that kind of move. At the moment, I just don't see that move happening. I don't think it's, in his best interest either. I think Westbrook is the more likely of the two to go than Durant. That could really kickstart it all off. If there's any sort of inclination that Westbrook's going as well, Oklahoma City could find themselves in a scenario where they don't have Durant and they don't have Westbrook.
Build around Ibaka.
That's not a great piece to build around.
It's not a great
It's a
piece.
matchup nightmare. I'd agree with you. And to be fair to Ibaka, I thought he raised his game last year. I thought he was, a really tremendous player for them. But no. Build around Serge Ibaka. Build around Steven Adams. There you go.
Coach Marv's question, is it possible that people are forgetting Durant's injury may help Russell Westbrook and Reggie Jackson work out how to play together? No, because Russell Westbrook, I don't think can play with people in the backcourt. I think he's going to do his own thing. It's going to be really fun to watch these first 3 weeks, but they're going to go into the huddle, draw up plays, and he's going to ignore it. And he's going to try and score a ton of buckets, and they're going to run around, they're going to be setting picks on the fly. I don't think you can figure out how to work with Reggie Jackson in that backcourt. Why would you go with Reggie Jackson in the backcourt in crunch time in a playoff game?
I think they'll start with Reggie Jackson. I think that's probably the way to go for them to start off with is play Jackson with Westbrook and see if they can try and figure this thing out. They'll still win their fair share of games, but I do think they'll find themselves in a bit of a hole in terms of going against the Blazers in this division, and that's what will ultimately cost them that divisional title, which could prove vital. So they'll drop down the seedings, and then they could really have a nightmare first round matchup.
Okay, let's move on to Denver.
Second round matchup, rather not first round matchup. But yeah, it's not a great team. People are probably going to hate me for hating on this team a bit, but I just don't really think it's a great team. And going back to guys like Skip Bayless, people need to stop listening to that guy. The guy's a fool.
He is. You know my reasoning with those guys. I don't listen to them. I laugh at them. The only thing that annoys me about them is that it gives people perception and gives many millions who do watch an idea about a player. That's the only reason it annoys me.
Yeah, and the trouble is there's too many people out there that listen to somebody else's opinion and buy into it without making up their own mind.
It's very true. Okay, the Denver Nuggets, they went 36-46 last year, did not make the playoffs. I thought they had an A+ offseason, and they crushed Aaron Aflalo. We spoke about that in terms of the Magic. They just stole him. Nurkic looks sensational. Gary Harris is going to be able to shoot, flat out shoot. Nurkic and Harris, by the way, Steven, traded in the Doug McDermott trade. We'll get your thoughts on that in a while after we've had preseason. And you look at their starting five, and the bench I think is pretty good as well. Ty Lawson, Aaron Aflalo, Gallinari will be back. He can shoot. Kenneth Faried, we've discussed many times and waxed lyrical about his fever and deserved contract extension. Then you've got Mozgov. They may start McGee. They've got JJ Hickson who can rebound. I like Wilson Chandler. Nate Robinson as the sixth man. Randy Foy, Gary Harris. This is a really loaded team.
Lot of
very good players.
Things went wrong last year for them.
Mm-hmm.
Injuries. We talked about, I think, off air around Gallinari. It seems ages since we've really seen him play an incredible amount of time on the court. This was a guy that averaged 16 points a game back in 2012, 2013. That seems like ages ago now. And it's because he's been injured so much. The guy can flat out shoot. Anyone who remembers him from not only his time in Denver, but also his time in New York as well. New York fans loved Gallinari because he could shoot. He eventually moved in the Melo deal. He's just one part of the offense. Adding Aflalo, given Aflalo, shall we say. That was another tremendous piece from him as well. Faried, we talked about what he meant to Team USA in FIBA. I thought the contract he's got will look like a bargain in a couple of years. I think they will ultimately try and move Mozgov if they can, to try and open up some of the blockage that is part of their front court. I think Nurkic could be eventually their starting center and has looked very, very good for them. But it's like you said, they got a good bench. The problem is for them, they're playing in the Western Conference. If they was in the Eastern Conference, I'd put them in as a playoff team.
They're really close to having like what Kentucky's trying to run, a perfect 5-man split, and just you could go with Nate Robinson, Gary Harris, Wilson Chandler, then you go Alonzo Gee, JJ Hickson, whoever you want, and then JaVale McGee or Nurkic. Really close to having a pretty good 5-5 split there. I know Faried's really good, Ty Lawson's really good, but it's not far off being a 5-5, which is incredible depth. My worry with them is, and I really like Brian Shaw. I've been on record as a big Brian Shaw fan. I thought the Lakers should have traded for Brian Shaw when they had their vacancy. I don't know if he fits this team. They seem to me to be a roll-out team Ty Lawson on the pick and roll with Kenneth Faried, and then he's going to kick it to a Flalo who will be open, or Gallinari who will be open, and that's how they should get up and down the court and win some games. And he wants to get into a half-court offense, slow it down, design good plays, tons of mid-rangers. I just don't know if it's the right fit for that roster.
Brian Shaw needs to coach in the Eastern Conference. He's in the wrong conference. It could help Denver come playoff time. When the half-court game becomes, much more important. But I think Denver aren't going to get to the playoffs to be able to make that an issue. I think they're just going to miss out. For me, they're the team that are probably most likely to miss out making the playoffs this year. It's a shame because I think they could be a very, very good team. I mean, we'll talk about League Pass teams on one of our other shows, but they're definitely a League Pass team that you should be watching. I think they're going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Would you rather have George Karl back with this team, or would you rather have Brian Shaw?
I like Karl's experience.
Mm-hmm.
Always been a fan. I remember George Karl, coaching when I first started getting into basketball. He's forgotten more about basketball than a hell of a lot of people know. And maybe he would be the experienced head that they would need, and maybe Brian Shaw isn't necessarily the right answer. It's one of those things. You've got to get yourself a coach that has got talent, but it doesn't mesh well maybe with what you have. And I think that's going to be one of the big issues for them over the course of the season. And maybe some frustration from, the fans because they think this team should be better than it is. They're waiting for a team to drop out of the playoffs that they can move in. It's just going to be like a battle, and I think they're not going to win that battle. But if they get into the playoffs and they're that 8th seed, I wouldn't want to face them as a 1 seed. I think that's a very dangerous proposition.
Coach Marv asked that question. He says, is this a dangerous team as a sleeper team to get out of the first round? I think someone's going to drop out of the West. I predicted the other day that all 8 would return. The more I think about it, I just love this Denver team. I look at this roster right now and I'm like, wow, we just ran through it. It's really good. And again, the Shaw thing scares me, but I'd like to think he's a smart enough coach where he's going to be like, look, these may be my principles, but how about winning some basketball games and getting to the 8th seed? Damn my principles, let's just win some games. Let's run through Kenneth Faried. Let's run through Ty Lawson. Let's go up tempo. Hopefully he's smart enough to do that.
Yeah, I think, if he recognises what he has, which is part of what a coach's job is, then they've got to adapt as well. But I find sometimes that coaches are quite pig-headed. And they play a certain way because that's the way they want to play. And it doesn't matter whether you've got the players to fit into that scheme or not. They'll try and impose that on their players. But yeah, I think you'll need to look around him and see what kind of talent he does have. And getting this team going up and down the court and finding those open shooters is a much better way to go.
Over and on wins for this team. I will place it at 42.
If they win 42 games, I don't think that's enough.
Okay.
And that's my big concern. I think they're round about 40 to 43, maybe 44 wins. I mean, it's right on the cusp.
Phoenix Suns-esque of last year. Just
for me, they're more talented than Phoenix are than Phoenix were last year.
I agree. I think they just missed. No, I'm gonna roll with the Denver Nuggets. I'm gonna say the Nuggets get in and they just sneak into the playoffs. I don't know what the total's gonna be, because that brings us to our next team, who I have great reservations about. Stephen Edwards heading into this year. Our final team is the Portland Trail Blazers. Obviously, beat the Houston Rockets in that playoff series last year. Dame Lillard is developing into a star, to superstar. But what they did this offseason was, I'm rubbing my eyes to just double check we got this correct. They added Chris Kaman. They added Steve Blake. They did nothing else. They lost Mo Williams. Their bench is just non-existent. And I like Lillard, obviously. LaMarcus Aldridge, we still have this thing hanging over him. We thought he was going to sign an extension. No extension has been dotted. He's a free agent at the end of the year. This isn't looking as good or as promising as a team who just went through the first round last year and should be having building blocks coming in with Lillard and Aldridge there. I just don't have a great feeling about them.
I've got them winning the division.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I think partly, obviously, that's because of Durant being injured from the get-go. but it is essentially the same team as what you had last year. And this was a team that did a hell of a lot of damage last year. I mean, they won 54 games. I mean, they knocked off the Rockets. Yeah, it was a hell of a shot from Lillard that actually won that series. And it is part of their growing pains. They went against a much more experienced San Antonio Spurs team. There are a hell of a lot of teams that have lost the playoff series to the Spurs.
In all honesty, they shouldn't have won that Houston game if we're being real.
No, they shouldn't have done.
Jeremy Lin had that blow-up game, they had that ref game, and then Lillard made a shot that they should have switched on and Parsons should have covered. So, but, I mean, defensively, and again, yeah, you said the same team's coming back, and I've been a big fan of Robin Lopez on the pod for a while. We both think like Batum and Matthews. It's a solid 5, but you get past that, and Thomas Robinson, CJ McCollum, you hope can take a step in his sophomore year. But defensively, and their bench is bad.
Yeah, I think this is, one of those teams. I think they'll get through the regular season, comfortably. I think they'll win 50 games or whatever, 50, 55 games or whatever. But when they get to the playoffs, I think they'll come unstuck. I really do. I think they're potentially going to have to play their starters too much in the regular season to get their playoff positioning. And then when you get to the playoffs, they're going to be in all kinds of trouble. I don't see this team going anything further than the second round. And I think they're one of those teams that could be a first round exit against a team that's a much lower seed and has got maybe a healthier team, a less tired team and, or more experienced team, depending on who they're facing. And I just don't see them getting past the first round. And I don't think that's where they had to make the big changes to try and make that jump to the next level. They've kind of stayed status quo from a point of view. Well, hang on a minute. We won 54 games last year. We got to the second round of the playoffs. Should we really be making any changes at this stage? Let's see what these guys can do. I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge for me played incredible last season. Can he take his game to another level? I don't think there is another level. Unfortunately, I think that's what LaMarcus Aldridge will do. Damian Lillard, again, tremendous. I mean, that's one of the successes of the draft, getting him for, what it ultimately did cost him. That's a hell of a 1-2 punch. I mean, them two guys combined for 47 points a game. And they're going to combine for something close to that again this year. But the regular season is just going to look as it has done last year, but there isn't that X factor or that player that you think, that's the key to them going further in the playoffs and making a real splash, because it just isn't there. So I think, yeah, they're going to be pretty much what they were last year and maybe a bit worse and maybe be a first round exit instead.
What do you do with LaMarcus Aldridge being a free agent at the end of the year? I actually thought they'd agreed to a contract extension. But I'm looking at SpotRack and I just Googled online to check that SpotRack hadn't got anything wrong, not that they ever do. The guy's a free agent in 2015-16. I mean, this is eerily similar to Kevin Love, no? And yet there doesn't appear to be the urgency.
No, there doesn't appear to be the urgency. I mean, Portland, you wouldn't say is a big market team. They're very blessed. They've got 2 superstars.
Smells to me like a Phil Jackson New York Knicks situation.
I think he could be enticed away. He made the jump last season into that upper bracket of talent in the NBA.
The only thing that keeps him around is that 5th year, if it's a max deal, whatever, because he's 29, so he'd be 34. This is his payday.
Yeah,
maybe you just go for all 5 years and sod it.
Or maybe he just re-signs up to the, re-signs with the Blazers on a deal that, helps out everyone. We just don't know. I mean, yeah, contracts are so difficult now to predict because you just don't know what goes through a player's mind. I mean, I think we pretty much had all figured out what Melo was going to do in the off-season. Aldridge, would he take a bit less money to stay?
I remember you telling me that.
I don't know.
I remember you telling me that you thought Carmelo was interested in winning and all this and that. And I remember telling you he's going to sign for 5-120. I mean, Aldridge shouldn't have to take any cheaper money to stay with the Blazers. Like, he's going to get a max deal and probably the top end, whether it's them or not. And the only way he takes less if he bets on himself for the new CBA, which I didn't think would be very smart. Do you?
I don't think it's even around the fact you bet on a new CBA. I think, can you realistically see the Trailblazers paying the tax? I don't think I can.
Can they not
so
re-sign
if you
him?
want to put together a competitive team in Portland, and if he feels at home in Portland, then maybe he does take less money to stay there. I still think there are players out there who may take that hometown discount. I don't know. It's very, very difficult to judge. I think when you think you've got it figured out, a player does something completely different. I think over time with Melo, I thought he would make the splash and go and win that, try and win that ring and become a free agent. But I mean,
It's difficult to win though.
Sometimes with Phil Jackson, he does, he's got that, he can spin a great story and then the money on top of that, and all of a sudden it sounds all great. And he believes in Phil Jackson. That's one thing. But we just don't know what the on-court players are going to look like over the next few years, and that will help Melo. With Aldridge, I don't know. This is a nice group of players. It's a perennial playoff team, but I don't see where it goes above that. So again, it's going to come down, does he feel that he can go to another team and get that ring? I don't know. People need to remember the fact that only one team can win the ring.
That's what I was trying to say. Look, it's difficult to win, and I think all these players get in their head at some point during this contract phase, like, how can I get to the best team possible? Melo's like, maybe me and LeBron can team up in Miami or whatever. And then you sit back at the end of the day and you're like, I have a 10-year career. Only 10 teams are going to win a title in my career. It's very difficult. And I'm going to say now, LaMarcus Aldridge is not going to be one of those people. Like, let's be real here. They're really fun. I think, like you said, they're perennial thing, but they've got a ceiling, and the ceiling is what it is now. Unless Damian Lillard overnight becomes a monster, which is possible. But is he going to get much better than he's been so far? Because he's been terrific. Their only way is to hit on another Damian Lillard in the draft that no one saw coming. I mean, how feasible is that to bet on?
Yeah, you can't
they're at
bet
their
on that
ceiling, and Aldridge is not going to win a title in Portland.
Aldridge, I mean, it's difficult to say this. I mean, Aldridge has already got another player alongside him who's going to be a perennial all-star.
And he's in the Western Conference.
Two perennial all-stars on that team, which there's still a good number of teams out there that would love to have two all-stars on a team. But it's the drop-off after that. Wesley Matthews will put up good scoring numbers, but yeah, he benefits from a hell of a lot from what's around him. I think at times Nicholas Batum can be regarded as underrated, and then sometimes I expect too much of him and he disappoints me. Robin Lopez, for me, I think is the ideal centre for this particular team. But then, as you say, the drop-off after the starting five is quite considerable.
Another thing about Aldridge is, if you're talking about him trying to find somewhere to win a title, you need to team up with other multi-time All-Stars. And with Kevin Love and with Chris Bosh, we heard whispers about them beforehand, and people liked their game and all this and all that. You don't really hear much about Aldridge in terms of other stars discussing him. I don't know how they feel about him. If you're like a star assembling a team, and this off-season you're trying to get something together, I don't know where it'd be. Say, for example, Melo's recruiting now, and you look at Marc Gasol, who's going to be a free agent. You look at LaMarcus Aldridge. Like, I don't know how they feel about Aldridge. He's a good player. He's an all-star, but, I mean, it's not like when LeBron was banging down the door to try and get Bosh to come with him to Miami, or I've got to have Kevin Love in Cleveland. I don't feel it's like one of those sort of situations, which to me just screams like, just take the 5-year max if they offer it to you.
I think that Marcus Aldridge made a hell of a leap last season, and that's probably got a lot to say about it. I mean, he's always been a guy that's, certainly over the 3 years prior to last season, which put something like 21 points a game, tends to be around about 8 or 9 rebounds. And then all of a sudden, he then made the leap to that next level. I felt he went 23 points a game, 11 rebounds, just a much better presence on the floor. Seems like he took over games more. Damian Lillard's obviously growth helped him a hell of a lot as well. You have that 1-2 punch, whereas it's pretty much been the Marcus Aldridge's team up to that point. He hasn't really had guys that were almost up to his level. But obviously Lillard coming along has obviously helped that. And he obviously then, elevated his game. And I think that was one of those great things. So maybe more people talk about the Marcus Aldridge going forward compared to in recent years, because there's a lot of guys you could take a look at and go, well, yeah, he averages 18 to 20 points, averages 9 rebounds. Do we really want to spend big time money trying to bring in a guy like that?
Like if you're going into next year's, sorry to cut you off again. I do that all the time, people. If you're going into next year's free agency class right now, and let's take New York as an example, because I think they're the ones who are gonna, Stoudemire comes off, Bajani comes off, they're gonna go and get or try to get a max guy. Do you want Rondo? Do you want Marc Gasol? This is just specifically as New York right now, the triangle, Melo, all that factor in, or Aldridge, because they're probably the top 3 guys.
I think Rondo is probably the more likely.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously he's been rumoured for some time now. Aldridge possibly gives you the bigger upside, but for me, I think it's going to be, it'll be Rondo. Marc Gasol, I wouldn't even consider.
Really?
I really wouldn't. And I mean, the thing I worry about with Mark is the fact that I think we may have already seen the best of him. I mean, he had that quite serious injury last year, came back from that. He makes the Grizzlies a different team when he's there. I mean, he was being the defensive player of the year, and he didn't get that by mistake. He was, a tremendous defensive player that year, and I'm not going to sit here and say he rightfully got the award because I don't believe that to be the case. But I mean, he's still a very, very good defensive player, but I don't see him making that move over to New York. For me, I think that the guy they would go and get, and maybe, dare I say, Melo's choice, would be a guy like Rajon Rondo.
Let's play a final game of Would You Rather to close out this episode. I think this is going to catch on with people. Stephen Edwards playing Would You Rather.
We haven't played this in a while.
These guys are all eligible to opt out of their contracts in the coming year. Let's stick with New York. I think New York's a fascinating situation because we're going to find out if Melo can recruit, and he's got no excuse now. He's going to have max cap space. Everyone's going to look at him like they looked at Kobe Bryant. Can you recruit? Can you bring a second All-Star? Do they want to play with you? And so, like we said, there's Rondo. Well, let's look at big man. They're going to need a big man. You got Al Jefferson, Brook Lopez. These guys can all opt out their contracts. Roy Hibbert. We mentioned there Marc Gasol, and there's DeAndre Jordan as well. You can throw a max contract around. Who are you going after? Melo needs some defensive help.
Yeah, I mean, Hibbert could be a nice pickup, but I don't know how much money I'd want to throw at him. I mean, I think he would be an ideal piece for New York. But I mean, how much money are you realistically going to give him? I mean, would you give any of those guys max?
I think you have to in this day and age. Especially with the new CBA coming, they're all going to be demanding maxes, and they've all got different quirks, whether it be age, unsuredness, or injury. And the one I think I would gamble on, and that's why I think he'll stay in LA, is I think they give DeAndre Jordan a max contract. I'd gamble on that. He's on an upward curve. The rest of them is iffy.
Jeez, I never thought I'd think about DeAndre Jordan on a max contract.
Neither would I, but think of the max is going to be, 12 a year? It's not too bad. Is it 64 million over 5 years or something? 4 years? Don't think it's that terrible. Max just sounds like a big word. I know it's only 3 letters, but it sounds... So. I mean, the one I would give, because I watch him all the time and I saw him dominate playoff series and dominate an NBA Finals, is Rondo. But I don't know if Rondo even fits the triangle. I really don't think he does. I think Jose Calderon is the perfect guy for the triangle. I know you can't keep with him long term, but I mean, they need a big man in New York. And if anyone's available and there's no re-signing in LA on the table of all those guys, I would bet on Rondo first, DeAndre Jordan second.
See, I think Rondo is certainly the first choice. I'd like to see a guy like Roy Hibbert, but I don't think you're going to have to pay Hibbert like a lot of money to get him to go over.
I do. I think you could look at there's 30 teams. They've all got cap space. They're all about to get more cap space. Some of them are so under the cap. It's like the worst percentage in a long time. And there's only, how many did we list there? Like 6, 7 guys for all that cap space.
Yeah. I mean, teams will take all kinds of different routes to where they need to get. I mean, a bidding war over Roy Hibbert, I suppose it depends on how he performs this season. I suppose that's the big key for him, because which Roy Hibbert are we going to see?
Did you ever think you'd see a bidding war over Gordon Hayward? We just watched that happen.
Yeah, I mean,
it's weird, man.
Because he's a shooter, and that's where the money goes. I mean, Hibbert has got his qualities that will command the money. I mean, he's a viable defensive presence. Offensively, he's obviously not the best, but teams are always looking for guys that can protect the rim, and if he comes out and plays like the Roy Hibbert played for the first 2 or 3 months of last season, yeah, he's definitely worth the money. You just don't know what you're going to get. I mean, it's been interesting to see what happens to him, bearing in mind all the other stuff surrounding the Indiana Pacers and how that affects him, because it can send players into a road that you would never even consider. That they'll just drag themselves down as well as everything else that's going on around them.
I agree. They should trade Roy Hibbert. That's it for this preview. We'll continue our previews tomorrow. I cannot wait to discuss the Central. I have so many thoughts right now about Kobe Bryant. It's untrue. And I'm going to shock people and defend him. That is all coming tomorrow as we discuss the Central. We're going to round out the 7 days of 7 previews. There'll be 2 more after that one. That means 3 more to go. Stephen, this was a good one. We've begun the West. We will continue with the West. We'll bring a special 7th show. So thank you for sitting down and doing this with me again. And I'll speak to you next time.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk the NBA. We've now wrapped up 4 divisions. Only a couple more divisions and another show
Turn to
to
the
go.
back. Get up what it is, what it does, what it is, what it isn't. Looking for a better way to get up out of bed instead of getting on the internet and checking a new hit. Me get up.